Welcome to the Life Unlimited podcast with Larry Heller. You deserve complete financial advice so you can confidently live your life your way, for life. Now, let's get into this week's podcast episode.
Hello and welcome to another Life Unlimited podcast with your host, Larry Heller. Today, we're going to talk about why distribution strategy demands even more attention when you're in retirement. All right, Larry, where do we begin?
So we're going to begin right where kind of you're thinking about stopping working and transitioning into either full-time retirement or even part-time retirement that has some income in there, and all the things you need to think about. And there's really, I kind of break it down into 5 different areas. Okay. And why you need to think so differently when you're in distribution stage than you are in accumulation stage. And Matt, I don't care how much money you have. When you change over and you no longer have that income coming in from your career, your job, you get a little bit nervous. You're not sure how much money can you spend. We've talked about that in a whole separate podcast. You're not sure how to really invest it. If the market has some big swings, what does that mean? So really taking understanding of the distribution strategy before you start will give you a whole peace of mind and a whole different mindset to make it much more smoother when you're no longer working.
Yeah.
So, why don't we jump into kind of the first area? I'll go through all 5 areas and then we'll jump into each one of them, Matt.
Okay.
So we have really income versus total return, which is kind of a conversation that I have with everybody that's kind of in retirement. And then taxes and how critical this part can be. It can be millions of dollars differences over your lifetime. And that's one of the things that we spend so much time putting strategies together and having conversations with you. So we'll dive into taxes a little bit more. And then what's your investment allocation? Okay, you're now retired, but should it change? Should you be less aggressive? Should you be more conservative? What does that mean to you? And part of that comes into area number 4, which is longevity. How long do you think you're going to live? And we'll talk about some of the different conversations that I had with clients. And then we're going to jump in a little bit to talk about estate and legacy planning, because you want to kind of think, okay, I'm a distribution strategy, but if I end up doing it proper, I can leave my heirs even more money. So 4 big topics. We can spend a whole podcast on each one of these, Matt. But so we're going to kind of jump into each one specifically and kind of peel away some of the layers there. And then, of course, if you have more questions, you can reach out to us and we can talk to you about that.
All right. Well, we have done some podcasts when it comes to income and spending in retirement, but we are going to start there. And you want to dive into that before we jump into taxes?
Yeah, sure. So a lot of people, when they retire, they're like, okay, I've accumulated all this money and now I want to take this pot of money and I just want to live off the interest. And that'd be great if you can live off the interest. But if you do that, does that mean you're going to earn less money over your lifetime? And so does it really make a difference whether you get like income, which is what I call yield? People looking at, what is the yield versus your total return on the proper portfolio? If you can make more money by doing a total return strategy than you are just looking at yield, then you're going to be much better. Plus, if you just focus on yield, interest rates changes. Okay. Remember a few years ago, interest rates were what? Almost 0. Remember that, Matt? Then they went back up and now they come down. Now they're kind of fluctuating in a certain range. But if interest rates are very low when you're retiring, then maybe that's not the best strategy either. And what do you do with this? You just going to live off of the income and you're never going to touch the principal that you've accumulated through your lifetime? Well, I mean, if you can, you want to live off that strategy, but a lot of people want to live off some of the money that they've made. And how do you do that comfortably over your lifetime? So putting that together, doing a retirement plan, a financial plan that we've talked about at nauseam over times will give you a lot more peace of mind, but creating and looking at income versus total returns. And the first thing you want to do is you want to coordinate your investment strategy with some of your fixed income streams. And what do I mean by your fixed income streams? Well, one of them would be your Social Security. How much are you going to get from Social Security? How much is your spouse going to get from Social Security? When should you take Social Security? And then if you're lucky enough, maybe you have a pension stream, or maybe you decided, you know what, we're having a lot of clients that are not completely retiring, but they're able to work part-time or just tone down, and they have an income stream from themselves. So what do you do with that income stream? And how do you coordinate, match the income stream versus your investment strategy? So looking at total return versus income and really understanding how that works and how to create something that'll work right for you.
Now, when it comes to working, you know what, I'm going to put a pin in that. I'm sorry. There's something I really think that we should do an episode talking about working in retirement. I think you've touched on that before, but man, I'm sorry, Larry, you just triggered like 20 questions that I wanted to ask. And I'm like, oh, we're not going to talk about that today. Okay. So let's move on to taxes. So even if you are making money in retirement, or you are just taking income off of the different retirement savings that you have, tax considerations are huge. Let's go there.
Okay. So there's a lot of different things to kind of talk about when taxes are going through. So if you're like most Americans, you've saved in a retirement account, probably a 401k plan. And a lot of that you've saved and you haven't paid taxes yet. And that pot is now growing and growing and growing. And when you do pull that money out, you have to pay taxes on that. So do you let that pot continue to grow and spend down your other investments that are not in these qualified retirement accounts? Do you spend more from your qualified retirement accounts earlier instead of the other accounts? Do you do a little from both? What's the right strategy and why? And the government has actually now pushed back the required minimum distributions before you have to take money out of these pots. So right now it's 73, but if you're born in 1960 or later, you don't have to take a required minimum distribution until 75. So if you're retiring in your early 60s, this pot of money could grow for 10 years before you have to take it out. And a lot of times we're seeing that being multi-millions of dollars in the retirement account. So now if you waited and you're like, la, 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 I'll take it out of my other accounts, I'll forget about this retirement account. And now Uncle Sam says, okay, you're now 73 or 75. You must take this money out. And by the way, here's how much you have to take out. And it's a huge number. And now you're in an extremely high tax bracket. And now you're like, oh my God, I got to pay all this money on this taxes. Why didn't I do something about this earlier and put a strategy earlier? Because you may have been what we call the donut hole. If you retire or even if you don't retire before 65, you still have 10 years before you now have to take it out, or 8 years. And maybe you've even deferred your Social Security. So you may be in some years where you have almost no taxes. So does it make sense to take some out and keep you in a lower bracket, so later on you're in a lower bracket? Again, putting that strategy together and trying to figure that out and where to draw from could be the difference of, hundreds of thousands and sometimes millions of dollars. And we'll touch upon, this, we talk about Roth conversions. I'll touch upon this in the legacy there, and we did a whole episode on this, episode 152, Matt, but also planning for that. Maybe you want to take some conversions and pay some taxes now to keep you in a lower bracket later on, and let that money grow tax-free, and either use it for yourself or pass it on to your heirs. So taxes. If anything of these 5 areas, this can be why you need to work with somebody to find out the best way of handling and setting up your distribution strategy.
Well, I'm going to argue with you on that, Larry, because I think the next one is also incredibly important, because a lot of people are the do-it-yourselfers and they think that their risk tolerance, specifically with their investment strategy and their allocation, is going to stay the same the closer that they get in retirement or after they retire. Let's talk about that.
Yeah. So there's so many different pieces of of this. So now that you're retired, okay, so you're retired in your 60s, and yes, the average age for a male is 78, and average age for a female is 81. But if both spouses are a married couple in their 60s, the odds are pretty high that one of the two of them are going to live into their 90s, Matt. So you don't have to do the math. You're in the 60s, you're going to go to your 90s. You may have 30 more years to live. Well, that's a long time. It's not our grandparents' generations where they retired, got their gold watch, and a few years were gone. You have a long period of time here. So you have to keep in mind that if interest rates are going to be enough, and also, what about that other magic I word? You have interest rates, but you have the inflation word out there. So if you're not keeping up with inflation and your account is basically staying the same, but you're just living off the interest, it's not worth as much anymore. And the interest that you're earning is not going to buy you the same amount because of inflation. So you need to kind of figure that out. But you also want to kind of talk about what the risk tolerance is, because again, I talked earlier, when you're retired, you get a little bit more nervous if you see your account goes down. So maybe you want to be a little bit more considerate, but now you're living longer. So now you want to have money that's going to grow to stay ahead of inflation. And we also have other reasons why we want to maybe carve out an allocation. If you don't have long-term care insurance, so one of the things we want to do is maybe set aside some money for a long-term care insurance, and that allocation should be different than everything else. Or some people have enough money that they can say, you know what, I have plenty of money here. So even though I'm older, I'm okay with more in equities because that money is going to my kids. So it doesn't matter what age you are. It depends upon exactly what's your goal. And then we have what we do as our reservoir strategy, which really helps put everyone's mind at ease. Again, another podcast 119, we talk about that. And this is really where you can be comfortable. And if knowing how you have a strategy, so if the market goes up, the market goes down, it's not going to impact your retirement, and it's not going to impact, and you can kind of not worry about what you hear on the news every day, and not have to and have a strategy that's in place that is tax efficient, is going to be put together to handle inflation, that's going to grow for you, but that's also going to be conservative enough there to provide the income that you need. So obviously putting an investment allocation together with the right amount of cash, the right amount of bonds, the right amount of equities in this day and age, we're doing some alternatives. So having all those combined with the reservoir strategy to minimize taxes is what we want to do when you're in the distribution phase.
Well, and you really, gave us a little bit of foresight into this next one, which is a difficult conversation. And Larry, I know that you have this all the time, and your team has this all the time with your clients, which you do need to ask the tough questions about how long you're going to live. And just very quickly on the investment allocation, I like that you highlighted the fact that there will be things that are inherited. And so therefore the risk tolerance in that inherited 401k Roth conversion or Roth, whatever, inherited IRA, those sorts of things can have a different risk tolerance, but you need to sit down with a planner and have that conversation. But let's spend a little bit more time on longevity, because people are living longer, and a lot of people really need to have a different plan.
Yeah. So the question is, we're planning a lot of times, for the most part, we'll run financial plans to age 95. And then we'll get some clients that'll say 95, my parents lived into their 90s. I don't know if 95 we better look at 100, make sure it works for 100. And then you got other people says, Larry, there's no way on earth I am going to be here at age 90. And I want to spend my money now. So I want to be able to enjoy what I have now. So people are different that way. And how do you create what you're comfortable with, what they're comfortable with? It is extremely important, having those conversations. And what is their family history? What's their current health scenario? Unfortunately, we have clients that have come to us that are not great health, and they know that there's no way that they're gonna live to age 100. So they want to be able to do something within reason, be able to put a plan in place that makes sense, but be able to use some of that money there. So really knowing the longevity and talking about that, and part of that is also protecting against the long-term illness. So, we're asking the question, do you have long-term care insurance? And if you don't, and you're married, and what happens if one spouse has a very long-term illness, and how much can that deplete your assets? So having those conversations is all part of retirement planning and distribution strategies.
All right. We also need to talk about the estate and how to plan for stuff, really not just while you're alive, but also when you're not going to be here anymore.
Yeah. I mean, obviously, most people want to be able to enjoy their retirement, live off what they have and spend what they have. We got a few people that said, oh, I'd love to be able to die broke, die at zero, put a plan together that I live to age 95 and I have $0 left. Well, that's not going to be the case. But there are other people that well, I want to leave some money to my heirs, but putting together the right strategy that we've been talking about could mean leaving more money to your heirs and also being able to enjoy the retirement. So one of the things that have come up now is in the Secure Act, the new rules that in the old days, when you died, you inherited, you passed money on to your children, they were able to stretch out their required minimum distributions. No more. They have to take it over 10 years. So now, when we talked about, you have a big retirement pot and you don't take that out for 10 years and it grows to a couple $1,000,000 and now you're in your 70s. Oh, and now you pass away and now the kids get that. And that's really nice. But now they have to take it out within 10 years. So in those 10 years, they may be in a very high tax bracket. So one of the things that we talk about distribution strategy, should we do a Roth conversion so we can move some things out at a low tax bracket? And so when they inherit it, maybe they don't have to pay tax. They wouldn't have to pay taxes on it. So having those kind of strategies there and looking at also some of the assets that you have and figuring that out, just, what's called a stepped up in basis. Some of the assets, maybe you bought a stock and it's really gone up. And if you sell it, and you want to use it now, there's capital gains tax. But when you pass away, there's what's called the stepped up in basis. So looking at that and all that is combined. And again, we're not just looking at each one of these separately. We're looking at each one of these combined with everything so we can really provide your goals that you want to do, but be able to do it in the most successful manner, both getting you the right return within the right amount of risk to provide enough income and total return during your lifetime, and to minimize taxes to leave as much as you can to the next generation.
And you have to really sit down with your team at Heller Wealth Management and also all of the people who are going to write up these documents to make sure that everything you just talked about before are going to be able to be in lockstep with what's going to happen with your legacy planning. But I have a question for you, Larry. I probably should know the answer to this. I'm sorry that I don't. If you inherit an IRA, can you, as the inheriting person, inheritor, whatever, the person who gets it, can you convert that into a Roth?
No, once you've received your IRA, you're in distribution mode, and you have to take that out within the
10 years.
So
immediately when you inherit it, okay, I got you.
Right.
Okay.
The government wants their money. They had deferred it, and then you would defer it even further. For a lot of this really started because there were a couple of people who figured out how to put tens of millions of dollars into this, and their kids are now drawing a small piece for long periods of time. So the government said, that's not what we want. So they're forcing you to take it out within those 10 years. And there's also minimum distributions you have to take each year within that. So you can't just wait until year 10. You got to take some out each year. So that time of planning is now really important. And I mean, we talk to so many people that come to us right before they're retiring or even in retirement. And I'm just amazed how nobody is really focused in, or very few people are really focused in on these strategies, or advisors have really focused in on their strategy. The accounts really don't get involved in this type of planning. And most investment advisors don't get involved in this type of planning. So you really want somebody that knows both. That's what we call wealth management. So you're putting both of those hats on when you're looking at this strategy.
You know, Larry, when you first started this podcast hundreds of episodes ago, one of the things that you used to say is that you were a recovering CPA. And I want to kind of go back to that just very quickly here, because part of the Heller Wealth Management difference is the fact that you do, even though that you're not practicing anymore, you do have this tax background, and it really does make a big difference because you can save all sorts of money, but if the government is going to take your all sorts of money without strong strategies, it can make a big difference. All right, bring it home, brother. Let's do a quick synopsis and tell everybody where they need to go if they need to learn more.
All right. So, we've covered this, but making the wrong decisions can cost you a successful retirement. It could end up paying significantly more in income taxes. It can be not spending enough during your lifetime and also leaving less money for your kids after you pass away. So by doing and putting a strategy in place, those wrong decisions can be avoided. So if anybody wants to talk to us about this, about your distribution, if you're approaching retirement, or even if you're in retirement and some of the things that you still may be able to do, feel free to check us out on our website, hellowealthmanagement.com, and you can book an appointment right through our website, or feel free to call the office at 631-248-3600 to set up a call with one of our advisors.
And I want everybody to realize that, Larry's hundreds of episodes into the show. And if you have not gone back and looked at previous episodes, like episode 152, where we talk about Roth conversions, or the Heller Wealth Management Reservoir Strategy, episode 119, there is so much magnificent content in this podcast that you should go back and realize that there are going to be different times in your life where different episodes are going to be applicable, and also friends and family. There are going to be friends of yours that you're having dinner with, and they're going to talk about something. You're going to say, oh my gosh, I think Larry might have talked about that. Please make sure that you share this episode, because one of the things that we want to do here at Heller Wealth Management is to make sure that we are providing great advice, great education for just about anybody who can use it. So,
right. And even if you're younger, you may want to listen to this, because then you can have these conversations with your parents.
Ooh, did we do an episode on that yet?
We probably did, but we could do another one.
We got 2 episodes out of this one, my friend. That's awesome. All right, everybody. Well, listen, if you have not subscribed, make sure that you do. And please make sure you go to hellerwealthmanagement.com to find out more about what you can do to make better investment decisions, and why a strong distribution strategy really does matter in retirement, because as Larry said, you make a couple of wrong decisions, it can cost you millions. So for Larry and everybody at Heller Wealth Management, this is Matt Halloran, and we'll see you on the other side of the mic very soon.